Dear friends, as I share these quotes from the Upanishads, remember that I frequently paraphrase them so that they are more contemporary and more easily understood by contemporary minds. So here we go today from the Prano Upanishad. Prano Upanishad. The relative world of space-time and causality is the self-sacrifice of the Absolute. The Absolute self-sacrifice itself as the relative world of space-time, matter, and energy. That's from the Prana Upanishad. And then from Kaivalya Upanishad. From this are born life. From awareness is born life, mind, and all the senses, space, air, light, water, and earth, which is the support of the universe. Kaivalya Upanishad. So these two need to be understood. That which we call the relative. So what is the relative? Relative is that which is impermanent, which is transient, which is ephemeral, which is ungraspable, which is a projection. But main thing is what we call the relative is impermanent. So any experience that is impermanent is the relative. And therefore, the entire theater of space-time and causality is relative. It's a superimposition on the Absolute. The Absolute is inconceivable, unimaginable, irreducible, spaceless, and timeless. The relative appears as the theater of space-time and causality. But the relative is the self-sacrifice of the Absolute. The infinite self-sacrifices itself to appear as the finite. That appears, then disappears. At the core of our being, we are the Absolute. And the self-sacrifice, which is called tapas, is actually, in a way, a very interesting sacrifice, because infinity, as we've understood before, remains infinite even as it expresses itself in the form of the finite, the appearance in the theater of space-time and causality. Like the movie and the screen, this computer screen. The screen could be thought of as the Absolute, and this program, this visual, this, what you're seeing, your own body and everything else, me, the paintings, that's relative. It's a superposition on the Absolute, which has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Who are we? We are the Absolute having a relative experience. Same thing as saying we are spiritual beings having a human experience, or we are non-local beings. We are having a local experience. I think that's pretty clear, right? That you're not the program on the screen, you're the screen itself, but you're also the program, but the program is impermanent, and you, the Absolute, is eternal and timeless and spaceless and irreducible and without cause and without beginning and without end. Okay, now let's go to the second one, which says, the Upanishad says that from this are born life, mind, and all the senses, space, air, light, water, and earth, which is the support of the universe. So it's related to the first. From this are born. What is this? This is pure awareness, the field of infinite possibilities, and it is modifying itself as sentient beings and their biological organisms Mind. Mind is a modified form of awareness. Knowingness becomes this or that knowing. And all the senses. Why all the senses? Because the senses are perceptual activities, which are modifications also of the same awareness. And then he goes, or she goes on to say, or the Upanishad goes on to say, space, air, light, and water and earth follow. So what is space? Can you see space? Look around you right now. Can you see space? You can't. Okay, but you can experience it. And why can you experience space? Because there are objects. And what are the objects? They're modifications of the space. So you need space in order to experience objects, and you need objects to experience space. You can see the objects, but you can't see the space, and yet you can experience the space. As I've mentioned before, if you took out even the objects, then even space would disappear, and what would be left would be the absolute, inconceivable, spaceless, timeless. But for now, space is your window to ultimate reality, the Chitakash, borderless, formless, modifying itself. So what is space? Space is an experience, even though it's invisible. And it is the first manifestation of the elements. Okay, now let's say we want to call that space the quantum vacuum. That's another term for the space that is brimming with virtual particles that are appearing and disappearing, and their movement is determined by the uncertainty principle. So unpredictable, not random, unpredictable. Difference between the two. So space is the first element that we experience, the most primal element. And then says space, air. So as the space moves within itself, in our planet anyway, it creates friction, and what appears as air is actually the biosphere. You can't live without the biosphere. This biosphere, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. But remember, each of these gases by themselves are actually, nitrogen is inert, but oxygen and hydrogen are both flammable. They come together, they create water. So, but for our purposes right now, think of air as the second experience in awareness as consciousness modifies itself into the elements. Then light. What is this light? We call it photons, electromagnetic energy, the electromagnetic field. Now, we can't experience the electromagnetic, or what we call the electromagnetic field directly, but you're experiencing it right now in the form of these images, these sounds, these colors. They're being brought to you through the electromagnetic field. But before we give it a name, the electromagnetic field is a form of energy, and we can experience energy. You know, the vital energy which we experience, according to the wisdom traditions, is prana. Prana is the vital energy that we experience, but we also give it names. The electromagnetic field, the strong and weak interactions, gravitational forces. Ultimately, the light is only the light of awareness, because without awareness, there's no concept of photons, electromagnetic fields, or whatever. And then further differentiation into water. I said air becomes water, hydrogen and oxygen, each independently flammable, could cause fire, become water, which then one can actually use to put out the fire. And finally, earth. Earth is the final modification of awareness as sensation, but all sense modalities ultimately combine to create the experience of what we call earth: space, air, fire, water, and earth. And these are words to describe modalities of experience. Everything is made of modalities of experience. And the modalities of experience are the projections of the self, which is knowingness itself, pure knowledge, which is modifying itself into different expressions of the known. And now we can call these different expressions of the known the physical body, 5 elements, modifications of perceptual activity. That's the physical body, the energetic body, prana, and then the subtle body, mind, intellect, and ego, emotions, reason, and self-image, all modifications of the self, and then conditioned self, jiva, and then atma, Atman, unconditioned self, and then Brahman, ultimate reality that becomes the universe, and we are that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am that. So I hope this is not complicated, but it does actually explain how creation occurs. I'll end with one more quote from the Bhagavad Gita, which is in Upanishad: earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, ego, all together, these are the eightfold divisions of my lower nature. This is Lord Krishna speaking as spirit to Arjuna, that represents, in this case, the divided mind. Once again, earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, and ego. All together, these are the eightfold divisions of my lower nature. What is higher nature then? It is that which allows us to know the lower nature: insight, intuition, imagination, creativity, higher consciousness, and transcendence. So, one more lesson from the Upanishads. Thank you.